Hello, and welcome to Supercom's May 2021 investor presentation at the Benzinga Virtual Conference. My name is Radam Trabelsi. I'm President and CEO of Supercom, and I'm happy today to introduce you to our story and provide some recent updates at Supercom. Attached, you'll find our safe harbor statement for your review. Supercom is a global technology security company. We have three segments which we focus on. Our main one is IoT tracking solutions. Essentially for tracking of offenders, we provide this solution to governments around the world. Some like to call this house arrest or home confinement. And we have two additional business segments in the secure identification and cybersecurity space. In secure identification, we essentially provide turnkey solutions for the issuance and reading of credentials, such as biometric passports, ID cards, driver's licenses, and so forth. And in cybersecurity division, we provide software solutions to protect endpoints at enterprises around the world. Some interesting investment highlights. We've been growing and expanding our footprint aggressively over the past years with 20 new multi-year government projects with long-term recurring revenues and predictability in the past 2 years alone. We've been gaining traction with our new Pure Health, Pure Care COVID-19 quarantine compliance technology, which we just won a $9 million project over 3 months in Israel. This is to help fight the spread of the coronavirus and a solution that we offered to governments around the world sometime last year after the COVID pandemic began. We have superior technology in the IoT tracking space, leading to over 65% win rate in competitive RFPs in governments in Europe that helped us win in countries such as Sweden, in Denmark, in Czech Republic, in Bulgaria, and more. And we've been doing some interesting cost optimizations, leading to increased gross margin of 900 basis points, while reducing operating expenses by 36% in 2020. Our EBITDA in 2020 grew to $2.8 million. We have secured a total of 119 patents, and we have insider ownership of roughly 23%, such that our focus, like yours, is to create shareholder value. One of the interesting parts of our revenues is the steady state recurring revenue. In 2020, 83% of the revenue was steady state recurring revenue. This consists of software as a service, a daily fee for our monitoring and tracking of assets and people on cloud-based software systems. This is where we're tracking offenders. We usually get a per day billing rate or per month rate. The more offenders that we're tracking, the higher the rate is, and it is recurring in nature. We have maintenance, which is post-implementation of a project, typically for 3 to 5 years, and then continued in renewals of contracts. Consumables. If we have passports in a certain country or driver's licenses or ID cards, they're buying everything from us. So we have ID cards, laminates, booklets for passports, and they're required continuously to purchase from us, also providing a recurring revenue aspect. We have software and hardware upgrades for platforms which we deployed, and as our customers expand, they need us to expand the solution to them. Also interesting on the right to notice our breakdown by segments. As we said, we have 3 main segments, the IoT tracking, the secure identification, also known as eGov in our business, and cybersecurity. And the revenues break down between 7.7 million, 2.2, and 1.9 in 2020. So our first division and focus, IoT tracking segment. Let's look at the market and some of the drivers. It's a multi-billion-dollar market of electronic monitoring of offenders with very high barriers to entry. There's only roughly 10 players around the world who manufacture this equipment and compete on these global RFPs. You can't come in with technology However strong and however capable you are as a company, without showing references from at least 5 customers around the world. You've had to deploy this type of solution, tracking of offenders in home confinement or in GPS tracking in order to even bid. So our market is very niche and very barriered, and larger players around the world have a hard time entering because of this. There is growth across the globe in Europe, US, Latin America. In almost every region around the world, we notice that when the project goes up for rebid, it's at a larger size. So if Florida was 7,000 units, it goes up to 9,000 units. Similarly for California State, similarly for other countries around the world. And the adoption of EM technologies is driven by various factors, which are important to understand. Firstly, there's prison overcrowding, especially in the US. There's not enough room, more and more people are incarcerated, and the prison capacity is not growing at the same rate. This is also due to a cycle of recidivism, as it's typically called. People go into prison for 10, 20, 30 years. They typically lose ties with their close ones and their friends, and they learn how to be great criminals sometimes. They come out of prison, and without those ties, without the training and experience of dealing in modern society, they're likely to commit crimes again and go right back into prison. Hence, you see this image on the right of just people going into prison and coming out and going right back in. And we try to prevent that by having this step of getting out of prison but still being monitored in a way and still having someone to communicate with in an ongoing fashion as they're being tracked, they're actually in their home or at their job where they're supposed to be. Also, there's heightened budgetary pressures. In the US, it costs $100 a day for a federal prisoner and $140 a day roughly for a state prisoner. And while someone is on electronic monitoring, the cost per day for the government, including the technology, including the services, cellular, everything around it, somewhere between $10 and $30 a day. So significant cost savings and significant improvements to the process of reentry from prison, together with prison overcrowding. These are some market trends and drivers for this industry. And lately, with the pandemic of COVID-19, there's been further pressure increasing the market size for electronic monitoring. We'll talk about that soon. Our technology and services. So we have a suite called the Pure Security Suite. It's an industry-leading comprehensive offender tracking platform. Everything is proprietary developed at SuperCom, from the hardware to the software on the cloud, software on the smartphone that we lock down. And this platform alone won us over 30 new government projects in the past few years. It's an increasing source of high margin recurring revenue because these projects are usually paid for per day, per unit. We lease the hardware and we charge for the software on the cloud. The technology includes real-time monitoring of criminal justice agencies of these offenders, whether they're at home or on GPS tracking when they're out to go to work. It increases offender accountability, enhances public safety, and also provides other services that we provide as a company, including case management, treatment programs, employment services, and so forth. You can see here on the next slide what our suite looks like. You can see it has many components. And firstly, the Pure Tag, the historic or incumbent ankle bracelet, which you may have seen in movies or other places around the world, is a one-piece heavy ankle bracelet. You have to charge it every single day. It weighs a lot, it's uncomfortable, and if you don't charge it for one day, the battery runs out and you are violating the program and likely to go back to prison. With our Pure Tag technology, it's a very lightweight, ergonomic bracelet. You don't have to charge it. You don't have to charge it. The battery lasts for over a year, and on the program, the person doesn't have to charge it. They put it on their leg, and they forget about it. Communicates seamlessly with a PureTrack smartphone. This is a hardened smartphone. We lock it down completely so people can't play with the location, they can't turn it off, they can't install other apps, they can't jailbreak it, nothing of that sort. Completely proprietary and customized. We use the hardware of Samsung, their phones, and our software on top of it. We have a PureCom base station, which compared to the incumbent base stations is a battleship of capabilities. It has two-way voice communications, it has long-term battery life, it has biometric authentication, it has audio, many other features which are essential to running these programs effectively. And then we have the software Pure Monitor that runs on the cloud, which essentially you can see allows the officer to see where all these offenders are and who has done any violation, and they have the protocol on how to respond in that situation. That's the suite, and it scores us most of the points when we're competing, and this has been the leading driver for us winning more and more projects around the world with technology where we score very high. Here are some select IoT tender awards. We had a win rate of over 64-65% in Europe alone, 11 national Europe tender awards. And also in the US, we've expanded into many counties and many states, including California, Texas, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Wisconsin, and more. Just recently, we announced another award in California for up to $4 million over the next 5 years in this division. Interesting development. Over the last 12 months, the COVID-19 pandemic actually created a surge in EM demand. In close quarters, in prisons, it's very hard to maintain the social distancing requirements to prevent the spread of coronavirus. This created a surge in electronic monitoring of offender demand, and we accordingly ramped up production to support this increase in customer demand. In the US, you can see there's over 2 million incarcerated Americans, where only a few hundred thousands which are actually on house arrest. And quickly last year, after the pandemic began, we saw government customers around the world, scrambling, looking for more and more units, thousands of units quickly, so they could take people out of prison and put them in house arrest. This is helping the general industry, not just in the short term, but also long term, because these government customers are trying more and more the notion of house arrest, and they're seeing how good it works and how much it saves them funds, and also how it could help them with the re-entry program and services. Just a few months after the beginning of the pandemic, they were seeing a 25-30% increase in prisoners wearing bracelets back in 2020. Furthermore, we have deployed our solution, which is an adoption towards COVID-19. It's a quarantine compliance solution, which essentially verifies that a person is at home during their 10 to 14 day quarantine. It's actually a simplified version of our full electronic monitoring of offenders. These aren't offenders now, just civilians, but they do have to stay home because them leaving their quarantine is just as dangerous or more than some of the offenders who are breaching their house arrest. Someone leaving their quarantine could spread coronavirus, and we all know the potential damages from those implications. We have recently sent this as a pilot to the Middle East, to Central America, to South America, the Caribbean, and also announced that we won a COVID-19 quarantine compliance project in Israel earlier this year in 2021. It's meant to aid in preventing the spread of coronavirus. This is after a successful pilot and the passing of a new law, quote unquote, the bracelets law. And the project estimated to generate $9 million in revenues over 3 months once it goes live. Let's look at our other two segments. First, secure identification. Here we're talking about again, highly barriered industry. It's a niche. You have to have experience doing exactly this, issuance of credentials, secure credentials, passports, ID cards, and so forth. Many different segments here within this general industry, whether it's e-passport, national ID, border control. And this, of course, is to prevent fraud, malicious activity, and increase functionality of governments and managing their citizens and their information. SuperCom has been in this space for over 30 years since it was founded, and it's launched many different projects in many regions around the world, including the UK, Hong Kong, Iceland, Israel, China, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and with each one of these projects, we get additional references for a company which deals with very sensitive data of governments, identification data, and we've done it well. And we use those references and those track records when we're bidding on projects in the IoT tracking space. So we're showing them that we tracked a lot of data points for a lot of citizens in many areas around the world. We've done so successfully, and we continue to win accordingly more national projects around the world. Our cyber division, we essentially have technology that we developed, and we have a robust sales distribution platform, over 50 active resellers, distributors around the world, with 700 plus customers and over 1 million active licenses. This allows us to have very high retention with our existing customers, but also allow for additional sales of new technologies that we're adding onto the same platform. You can see we have different modules. It's a very modular suite. We have Protector, Encryptor, Inspector. Each one has different capabilities, all towards the same goal of preventing data leakage from enterprises. We sell to, hospitals. We sell to government counties. We sell to technology companies, to investment companies, to banks, and so forth around the world. And this generates a couple million of high margin recurring revenue per year, with potential to grow this customer base to more and more units, or more and more seats of our technologies. Some financial information and stock info. In 2020, revenues were $11.8 million with a gross profit of $5.6 million, EBITDA of 2.8. And this is interesting because a lot of our expenses are actually depreciation and amortization from purchase price allocations when we acquired several companies back in 2016. With financial expenses, mainly to service our debt and some allowance of doubtful debt. This is mainly to our old, more traditional business of the secure identification out of Africa and South America. Our current customers, the majority of our revenues is from developed countries today, and the collectability is much better. Some balance sheet items, close to $4 million. This is at the end of 2020, of course. Current assets of $25 million, total assets 40, similar in total liabilities of $35 million. Stock price has been very volatile because we've been winning projects quite rapidly, a lot of movements around there. But we did file our 20F on time this year on April 30th, and we plan to continue filing our quarterly reports in a timely fashion. And we hope that will provide more transparency and updates to the investment community. So, as a summary, SuperCom, we're a leading provider of IoT tracking, secure identification, and cybersecurity solutions. We are expanding rapidly, awarded over 30 multi-government projects since 2018. Superior technology. These that's what the scoring shows when we compete against other providers in the space and help us get a very high win rate in Europe. New customized COVID-19 quarantine solution has been gaining traction. We were awarded just a sizable project in Israel. We're waiting for the go live on that. Our steady state recurring revenues represent 83% of our total 2020 revenues, giving us a strong base of predictable revenues with government customers in the years to come. We're expanding our footprint in multi-billion-dollar global markets with high barriers to entry. Our EBITDA grew to $2.8 million in 2020, and there is 22% roughly insider ownership as of the end of 2020. And of course, as shareholders, we, just like you, are trying to increase the value of the shares, which is of high importance to us. Investor relations contact at ir@supercom.com, or call our office line.